the inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
I think too much was given away. Sure, it's not a good deal. It was not a good deal at the time, and we got to deal with the aftermath of it.
Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. I'm Dan Hurley. Every person who lives in Hamilton County, every government unit operating in Hamilton County has been dealing with the aftermath of the 1996 contract to build new stadiums for the Reds and Bengals for the last 15 years. Although the Great Recession and anemic recovery has exacerbated the situation by further suppressing sales tax revenues, recent economic difficulties have only speeded up the onset of the most difficult but inevitable implications of the contract. A recent Wall Street Journal article declared Cincinnati's stadium deal the worst pro sports local government deal in the United States. The bind that contract puts the county in was hammered home again this week when the commissioners voted for a $300,000 upgrade for the stadium instant replay system. The full impact of the stadium deal, which not only includes the debt service on the construction, but annual maintenance and operating costs like scoreboard upgrade, now absorbs over 16% of the county's annual operating budget. Hamilton County Commissioner Todd Portune has proposed an amendment to the Cincinnati City Charter that would allow the city to impose a ticket tax on the patrons of the Reds and Bengals games to cover the annual operating costs of the two stadiums. Under the contract, the teams have the right to approve any such tax, but if the voters approve it at the polls, it gets around that contractual restriction. To cover the $900,000 operating cost of the Reds Stadium, those are annual costs, the ticket tax would have to be about 44 cents a ticket. To cover the $8.5 million operating cost of the Bengals Stadium, the ticket tax would have to be $14 a ticket, or about that. What would this tax really accomplish? What is the likelihood that it can get on the ballot given the short time to collect signatures? And since this is a maneuver proposed by a county commissioner but changes the city charter and can be voted on only by city residents, what are the implications for the city? To discuss this proposal, I am joined this morning by Hamilton County Commissioner Todd Portune and Chris Bortz, a member of the Cincinnati City Council. Both of you, welcome back to Newsmakers.
Good morning,
after
Dan.
many times, and Chris, I know we need to have you more often. Chris has made that clear to me that he hasn't been on for a while. Todd, let's just start out. Is the goal here to cover all the operating expenses on an ongoing basis so that, you know, whatever the increased operating expenses a year, this tax would be adjusted so that, you know, 5 years out from now, whatever figures we put up on the board and would change? Is that what we're at?
Well, the goal really is, Dan, and this is a citizens initiative. There's a 5-member committee that is circulating this petition. We have over 100 petitions being circulated as we speak today by citizens throughout the city of Cincinnati. And it's part of a national movement. We have reached out to each of the 44 other major league cities nationwide where there is a publicly supported deal of one sort or another for pro baseball, football, basketball, or hockey. So that's what the genesis of this is. But it's very narrowly tailored, and it does this. Number one, it calls on the leagues and the teams to pay the costs of doing business, of the business of professional sport. Class Action, which is the name of the initiative, CLASS is an acronym for Citizens League Against the Subsidy of Sport. So number one, it says leagues and teams, team owners, pay the expenses, the costs of doing business of professional sport. If they don't, then the consumers of that business, the patrons of the stadiums, would be called upon to pay the expenses in the form of an increased tax on the admissions at games.
Chris, this is, as I've tried to outline, I hope I did it correctly, a proposal that would be an amendment to the charter of the city of Cincinnati, because the county, by law, can't impose this tax.
That's right. There's no county authority to do that.
And the city has a 3% ticket tax now. This would change things. How does this look like? What does this proposal look like to you from City Council's perspective?
Well, I think conceptually, first, the policy makes sense, that it does seem fair that the tickets themselves and the tax associated with those tickets, really a user fee, should help us pay for the cost of these stadiums and the difficulties of the deal originally. The problem, as I see it now for the city, really is pretty straightforward, and it's what you noted. We have a 3% admissions tax in place now, and the language of this particular amendment looks to replace that 3% base tax for the Bengals and the Reds, so that money would be diverted instead to the county stadium fund. That creates a budget hole for the city of about $2 to $3 million.
So your assumption is that this means that this would replace the current tax, but the city would still collect the tax, right?
The city would still collect it, so we collect about $4 million a year.
Okay.
2 to 3 million of it, and it varies depending on the success of the teams and so forth. But 2 to 3 million roughly is that 3% we collect for the Reds and the Bengals. We would collect the tax under the calculation as proposed if the amendment passes, and that calculation then would also, I think, run into some legal challenges, and I think the Reds and the Bengals would certainly have something to say about it. But that money would then be diverted back to the county stadium fund, and that would create a $2 to $3 million hole for the city.
Well, I hope I can put that fear to rest immediately. This does not propose to take any of that initial 3% of the admissions tax. The petition is written in such a way that this is an additional surcharge.
So this would be on top.
This is on top of the 3%. This is an additional surcharge on tickets, only at Reds and Bengals games. And the policy is absolutely, as Councilman Bortz said, in that what this really is it's responding to what about 9 out of 10 people that I run into when the issue of the stadiums comes up will inevitably say, why don't the people that use the stadiums, why don't the people that benefit from the stadiums pay for them? Well, that's really what this does. This answers that question very directly, but it does not take that 3% away from the city.
Well, unfortunately, it does, and the city solicitor has weighed in on this and believes that that's the case. And
now,
of course,
it
the
does
Reds and the
because
Bengals,
you think the language of the actual proposal.
That's right. The language of the proposal. Now, the petition language is different, but the actual ballot language, the language that would be in the charter.
Okay.
The way this would be diverted and the change to the city municipal code and so forth, it really is a replacement for the Reds and the Bengals. And of course, the Reds and the Bengals will argue that too, so they don't pay that additional 3%. And the city then is, of course, the liable party. And this is really pulling the city charter, or in effect usurping the city charter, into a county arrangement, which is weird and strange, and puts the city in the position of having to defend this charter. And the city solicitor is pretty confident that yes, in fact, this replaces that tax, creates a budget hole for us, and there's some other significant problems associated with it. And one is the legality of the tax itself under state law, that you have to have a defined number. And because this is based on a calculation and there's no appeal process, the tax can go up or down without a process in place to challenge it. And that is, I think, a significant state constitutional concern.
Todd, do you have any?
Well, I think we're getting into issues of argument and opinion as opposed to certainty of law. You do have a defined number. People will be apprised each year of what the exact amount of the tax will be, and the proposal also has a minimum and a maximum threshold. That the tax will never be below a certain amount, will never be above a certain amount. So my understanding is that it meets that objective very, very directly. What we're hearing here, I think, are the kind of arguments or challenges that expectedly the Reds or the Bengals, if they choose to try to upset this, which one of them likely will. I don't know if the Reds necessarily would. My expectation is the Bengals will try to upend this. But we're hearing those kinds of arguments of people who again, don't want to pay for their business expenses, wanting to find a way to not have to pay for their business expenses.
Another question just about the structure of this ticket tax or the user tax. Mm-hmm. As I've tried to read about this, it sounds like no matter what price ticket I bought for a Reds game or a Bengals game, I'm going to pay the same tax as the person in the high price. You know, if I buy the lowest price seat, I'm going to pay the same tax as the highest price seat, whereas the current ticket tax from the city is 3% of whatever the face value of the ticket is. Am I understanding this correctly?
Yeah, that's right.
You are.
It's a flat fee.
It's a flat fee.
But
why is it structured?
The real challenge, I think, and this is something that I think we really have to focus on as a city, because I think, again, the policy is worth considering. A user fee is an interesting approach to the challenge we all face as a city and a county. But we don't want to face that challenge by creating a budget hole for the city, or the potential for a budget hole for the city, when we're already confronting massive deficits and struggling to maintain our basic infrastructure. And this is where I think you run into some challenges. When you amend the city charter, there really should be a process in place that includes the city administration, that includes city council. That's a discussion about how to make sure it's done appropriately and legally, and doesn't create a bigger hole. We all want to solve the problem that we face as county residents, but the city of Cincinnati has its own challenges as well, and this just exacerbates those challenges. And I think that's really the problem with this approach.
Todd, you've been over on the other side. You've been on council.
I have, and I'll be honest with you, Dan. This argument that this is taking money away from the city is a red herring. I've not heard this before this morning, first of all, but the provision includes in it a measure where the city is able to recoup the city's costs of administration of the tax. This is designed to be budget neutral to the city of Cincinnati, not to take any money away from the city at all. So we're already hearing, unfortunately, the kinds of throw things against the wall to defeat this at the polls that I would expect after we collect the requisite number of signatures and we move forward into the campaign phase. That's unfortunate. But this is budget neutral to the city of Cincinnati. It's very narrowly tailored. It only goes into effect if the team owners and the leagues don't pay for their business expenses to begin with. So in the first instance, they should do the right thing, which is pay for their own expenses. If they don't do that, then the people who use the stadiums will pay for it. And the last thing, Dan, just let me say real quickly, the city's tax, the 3%, this kind of gets back to the argument that it's not definite, it's not certain, we don't know what the number is. Well, that number on a city taxpayer today goes up and down depending upon the face value of your ticket. But you can calculate exactly what it is based upon 3% times the face value, you know what the tax is. Same theory applies to this in terms of you can calculate to some certain what the amount is going to be.
But the question I had asked was about the flat fee across all ticket prices, in tax language,
the fairness
regressive versus progressive tax. Why is it written this way? Because with the Reds tickets, I don't know, 44 cents. I'm not sure if that makes that much difference. But for a Bengals tickets, because they don't have as many patrons, and because the ticket prices can be a lot higher, I mean, all of a sudden $14 can look pretty darn big.
Well, Bengals tickets are substantially more expensive than Reds tickets to begin with.
Right.
And that fluctuation between seats in terms of the price of the ticket, flat versus a graduated scale, from our estimation, it's really 6 of one and half a dozen another. When you're getting into the upper echelon price scale of what Bengals tickets are, your regular individual where a regressive tax is going to really make a difference is not typically your fan at Bengals games. Professional sports in football is really a corporate venture in this day and age, unfortunately, but that's the truth. And I would say this, if anyone has a problem about it, the complaint really shouldn't come at the citizens that are circulating this effort. Take it to the owners and tell the owners they should be paying for their expenses in the first place.
Well, now it's the county at this stage that has the responsibility for these stadiums. I mean, the city, we're all residents of the county if we live in the city as well. But, everybody's concerned about this. Chris, do you feel this is a matter that if you're saying the policy is okay, would you be supportive if you go back and rethink how this is put together? Is there any way to have the entire county population vote on this, or is this always got to just be a city vote? Is this always the city's going to be in the middle of this sort of structurally? That's what seems really strange here to me.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest part of the challenge here is really pulling the jurisdiction of the city of Cincinnati into an agreement that's really between the Reds, the Bengals, and the county. And as you noted, we're all a part of the county, but we do have different issues to confront at the city. We are participants in finding the solution, but I do think it needs to be a county-wide solution. In effect, though, the user fee argument, I think, is absolutely worth looking at. I think there are a couple of challenges. You noted one. The fact that it's a flat tax will have an impact on the people who are buying less expensive tickets who may choose not to, and that has a ripple effect. It has a chilling effect on our downtown economy and who's going to visit the city, and maybe they're going to choose not to because of this additional tax. You have to understand that, I think, more fully. But again, the biggest part of the problem, I think, is pulling the city, usurping the city charter to solve what really is a problem that belongs to the whole county.
Todd, I've got one other area, and I'm aware of time. My understanding is that you're also looking at going back to the courts and basically arguing that a contract can be rewritten because of changes of the economic situation, not just around this contract, but that this is part of contract law. You guys are lawyers, I'm not. Is that what you're thinking? You thinking there is another crack at the legal approach?
Well, I think so, and this is something that I just introduced this past week as a commissioner. This other measure is truly a citizens' initiative outside of anything that the county is doing. But the county now, as a party to the lease agreements, there's a very well-known principle of contract law and equity that courts get involved in, where contracts can be rewritten, can be reformed based upon issues of a material change in circumstances that frustrate the performance of the contract or mutual mistake of fact. This deal was predicated upon the sales tax growing at a certain rate.
Right.
It hasn't because of 9/11, and it hasn't because of the recession. And nothing that anybody contemplated, but that's what that's about.
And I've got to get out of here right now, but thank you very much.
Can I give you just one final piece here, because I think this is critical, and the residents of the city need to know this. The city solicitor is the final interpreter of the city charter. He believes this particular effort would create a $2 to $3 million hole for the city.
Okay.
That's a problem for the residents.
Thank you. Stay tuned. After the break, we'll take a look at an underwater archaeologist responsible for the Cleopatra exhibit. Over the last several months, thousands of Cincinnatians have explored the life of Cleopatra, the last queen of Egypt, through the temporary exhibit at the Cincinnati Museum Center. Many of the spectacular artifacts in that exhibit were recovered from beneath the waters of the Bay of Alexandria by underwater archaeologists. Besides recovering beautiful objects of stone, gold, precious stones, the recovered materials have thrown light on the Greek influence of later Egyptian culture. Welcome back. Books depend on ideas expressed through words and maybe photos or illustrations. Exhibits communicate through artifacts, material culture. Artifacts from ancient Egypt, usually a mummy, decorated sarcophagus, an effigy image, have been a source of fascination for museum goers since the beginning of modern museums. Ancient tombs have been the source of the bulk of those artifacts, but underwater archaeology is the source of the artifacts for Cleopatra, the search for the last queen of Egypt. And that depends on the work of Frank Goddio, who is an underwater archaeologist responsible for directing the recovery of these critical artifacts from the floor of the sea off the Egyptian coast. Frank, welcome to Cincinnati and welcome to Newsmakers. How long did people know that there was something there, that there were artifacts on the floor of the ocean? Were scholars aware that they were there but couldn't get to them? How long ago was it?
There was some hypothesis. 3 cities were missing and had never been discovered. And some scientists thought that they were on land, and others made the hypothesis that they could be underwater. And I thought most probably they were underwater, and I undertook that mission with that hypothesis.
Now, they're underwater because of what? What had happened that had sunk these ancient cities that, as I understand it, predate Alexandria, right?
Absolutely. We are there northwest of the delta of the Nile River, And that region has been struck by natural disaster at different periods of time in history, such as earthquake, tidal wave, and this causes two cities to be totally sunken under the Bay of Aboukir, and part of the city of Alexandria to be covered by the sea.
And how deep in the water?
It's not that deep. It's 30 feet deep, but everything is covered by 2, 3, up to 10 feet of sediment.
And is there a way of discovering what's under that sediment so that you know where to search, where to dig?
Yes. Well, we developed a specific technology in order to map whole area, and we are using specific equipment such nuclear resonance magnetometers that we developed for that purpose. And we have some electronic map and images, but it doesn't tell you there is such a thing under the sediment there. It says only, well, something happened here, and you should look at that spot.
You don't know what you're going to find. You don't know exactly what the situation's going to be.
Exactly.
We have some more footage that you've supplied of some of the work underwater. Was this work commissioned by the Egyptian government?
Yes, of course. We are working with the National Council for Antiquities, and with them and under their supervision. But we are a private team, a private institute, and we started the work 15 years ago, and we are going there twice a year, and we work.
And who, as you recover these artifacts, who owns the artifacts? Do the Egyptian people retain?
The state of Egypt owns everything, of course, but they allow sometimes exhibit to be performed out of those artifacts.
So this, what we're seeing in Cincinnati, as spectacular as it is, it's just a fraction of what you have been able to bring up.
Yes, of course. It's a fraction, but it's a nice fraction. And people have to understand that those objects have never been seen before, even in Egypt. They have shown for the first time after more than 2,000 years of disappearance.
And what, for you, now, obviously, to do this kind of work, you've had to do tremendous amounts of research to get ready to even do the work. I mean, I know a little bit about the work of archaeologists. What is it that you learned about ancient Egypt that you had not, from these artifacts, that you had not been able to understand from what we knew before?
As a matter of fact, we have learned a lot about the contact between Egypt and Greece, how those contacts started long ago before Alexander the Great came to Egypt, how they developed and how they end to one of the most fabulous cities, Alexandria, with a fabulous history, which also ended more or less at the death of Cleopatra, 30 BCE.
So this is the congruence here, or the coming together of the story of this one person, Cleopatra, and the story of Egyptian culture at a critical moment. So it really sets up the entire exhibit.
Absolutely, absolutely. As a matter of fact, all object refers back to the times of Cleopatra, from before the time, from after the time, but there is relation. And you can see in that exhibit some objects that she has seen during her life, that she must have touched during her life. But the whole exhibit also is the story of the mixture of two civilizations, Greece and Egypt. And we are all our culture are coming, most of it, from that.
Right. This coming together of these different Mediterranean cultures. I know that you're about to head back to work again. When will you be back in Egypt to do dives?
The whole team will be back by September 15 for 45 days in Alexandria and in the Bay of Aboukir again.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your work. Thank you for what you've created and brought to Cincinnati. And let's make sure people know how to see this exhibit. If you would like to find out about tickets for Cleopatra, you can check out the Museum Center's website at www.cincymuseum.org or call 287-7000 and they can direct you to the right office. It is recommended, since these are timed tickets, it's recommended that you make a reservation ahead of time so you can plan your visit and make it as efficient as possible. You try to control the number of people who are in the galleries at any one time. Thank you for being here. Really enjoyed meeting you, and good luck with your future work. Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Join us again next week to meet the men and the women shaping our community for the future. Have a good week.